Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I am sure that you will agree that she deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Dr. Katharine Neill Harris. Who is the Alfred C. Glassell III Fellow in Drug Policy at Rice University's prestigious Baker Institute for Public Policy. Her current research focuses on the availability of drug treatment for at-risk populations, the opioid epidemic, and the legalization of medical and adult use cannabis. She supports policy reforms that treat drug use as a public health issue, such as alternatives to incarceration for drug offenders, needle exchange programs, safe consumption sites, drug testing services, expanding access to medication-assisted treatments, and greater integration of substance use and mental health services with each other and with the other areas of medical service. She earned a BS in criminal justice from George Mason University and her master's and PhD in public administration and urban policy from Old Dominion University. She received her Old Dominion University Outstanding PhD Student Award in 2014 and the Simon Scholarship for Academic Performance in 2011 and 2012. We welcome Dr. Katharine Neill Harris for her first appearance on Saving America.
Oh, thank you for having me and for that amazing introduction.
We're very happy to have you. As we talked about before we began recording, you're a neighbor. It's great to have somebody in the hood. So as you know, we ask people 3 questions that we give them in advance so they're warmed up and ready. In your writings, you focus on the overall issue of drug abuse in America. That is not just about fentanyl coming in from Mexico. How severe is the problem in the United States?
Yeah, so we do have a long tradition in the United States of substance use and substance misuse. Addiction is not a new problem that we're having. We have seen an increase in recent years in substance use disorders. But the thing now that is different is the drug supply itself has changed. And so, what we've really seen over the last 10 years is the introduction of fentanyl into the illicit marketplace and the role that that's played in just making substance use not just, dangerous or risky, but really potentially deadly at a whole new level. And so that means now that the risk for overdose is so much higher for people who maybe don't use substances regularly and don't have that problem of misuse. But underneath that sort of immediate threat of overdose, I mean, we have sort of a long-standing issue of substance use, and not just with illicit substances, right, but with alcohol as well. In 2023, 46% of Americans reported binge drinking in the past month. So there are certainly issues that we have here with using substances to a problematic level.
And of course, I think most of our listeners are aware of the fact there was a gigantic series of settlements for basically heroin-based legal drugs that were reportedly just ridiculously overprescribed to our population. So is that part of the wrap here?
Yeah, so the opioid settlements have been a big deal. Looking back in the early 2000s, Purdue is sort of one of the more infamous names at this point, but many other, not just the manufacturers, but also doctors and pharmacies and pharmacy benefit managers, these kind of middlemen, all of these different groups really sort of engaged in letting the free flow of these drugs take place, right, in exchange for essentially money, right? And that's what we saw happen. We also saw that not only did that was kind of the supply side, this massive influx of supply of these substances, but also there was a strong demand for them. If you look at some of the places that were hardest hit by the overdose crisis 20 years ago, it was, places that were poor and heavily relied on manual labor, right? So we're talking about like Kentucky, West Virginia, Appalachian area, right? That was an area that Purdue knowingly targeted. So now, right, we've seen a lot of settlements come down. Over $50 billion currently is the national total for the settlements. We still expect more down the pipeline. And so that money is going to be really critical to helping the nation respond to the crisis, which has really sort of moved away from those prescription opioids to, illicitly manufactured fentanyl and other substances like methamphetamine.
And that ties in beautifully with our second question, which is how can America do a better job of dealing with persons with substance abuse issues? And hopefully some of that money is going to go to that purpose, right?
Yeah, I hope it does. As far as how the money's being used, it varies a lot by place, right? But certainly, we need more funding for treatment. So we have roughly a quarter of people who need treatment get it. When we look at opioid use, right, we're very lucky with opioids so that we have several medications that treat opioid use disorder, that can manage it, that can reduce the risk for overdose. Those are substances like methadone, buprenorphine. Those tools are available, but people are not prescribed them nearly enough. I think it's around roughly 10% of people with an opioid use disorder get prescribed a medication. So that population in particular, we're not using all the tools that we have. We're not using our best available tools for a huge portion of that population. So ensuring access to those kinds of things is really critical. Funding is needed. There's no way around it. Everything needs more funding. This is one of those things that we do need more funding. I will say that we have seen in the past, it's about 18 months now, a decline in overdose deaths that can at least partly be attributed to the increasing prevalence of naloxone. And that's one thing that everybody has really gotten on board with in the last several years, regardless of party affiliation or any of that other kind of stuff, is that we need to make naloxone more available. Naloxone is a drug that reverses an opioid overdose. And so that's been a big benefit. We need to continue to do that. We also need to make available things like drug testing services so that people can know what are in the substances that they're taking. Fentanyl is just one example, right? The most prevalent example right now of illicit opioids, but there's other things in the pipeline, right? There's so many more synthetic substances on the market than there used to be, and we need all the tools that we have to identify these substances and offer people alternatives, right? Whether it's treatment and also recovery services, and opportunities to live a meaningful life that doesn't involve substance use.
Well, it's a fascinating issue, and I believe when you mentioned the treatment for opioid crisis, is that the thing that we call Narcan that's done through the nasal passage?
That's right. Yeah. So Narcan is the sort of one of the name brand versions of naloxone.
Okay.
And so it's an opioid antagonist. And so what it does is that when you're overdosing, you essentially have too many opioids sitting on your opioid receptors in your brain, causing respiratory depression. You take the naloxone or the Narcan, and that drug essentially kicks the opioids off of your opioid receptors. And that's how it kind of works. And it reverses that overdose. It really is a miracle drug. And so that is kind of like an immediate way to keep people alive. And then to ensure that people don't overdose in the future, right? That's where those other drugs like buprenorphine, which goes by the name brands, Suboxone and Subutex is another one, or Sublocade, having those kinds of things available because they're the best tool we have to ensure that people who do have opioid use disorder aren't going to the illicit market, aren't getting fentanyl, right? That they're getting something that's safe, that is FDA approved, that has a reliable dosage, that's much, much safer than anything available on the illicit market.
Fascinating situation. Now, you write about the rapidly growing issue of hemp products with chemically derived and high potent THC products available in Texas. What do you recommend, and would any of the bills presently proposed in the Texas legislature help that situation? Because there's all sorts of stuff going on in this topic.
There sure is. Yeah, the hemp space in Texas and around the country is just kind of in flux, to put it mildly. And so in Texas right now, right, marijuana is illegal unless it comes through the state's compassionate use program, which is a limited medical marijuana program. The main difference between hemp and THC is the amount of delta-9 THC. Anything less than 0.3% delta-9 THC is considered hemp and federally legal. And that's where sort of what we're dealing with in the state right now. Is that there's just been a huge proliferation of products that are considered legal, but that can be very intoxicating. And also now this sort of rise of these synthetic cannabinoids that you mentioned that are derived from hemp, but that also have maybe a lot of other different kinds of chemicals or residual solvents in them that are not healthy for people. And so this session, the legislature has been working to address these issues. There's a bill in the Senate, Senate Bill 3, that essentially bans all hemp products with THC. That bill isn't necessarily going to address the safety concerns around these products, because they're still going to be available, but now if they're banned, they would be only available in an illicit market space, which is not subject to any kind of government regulation or oversight. There's a different bill in the House Bill 28, that would essentially ban THC in everything except for drinks. So no THC edibles or flour, but you can have THC in drinks. The alcoholic beverage industry, likes that one. But the reasoning behind it, and to some extent, is that when we are seeing like kind of problematic products that have other sorts of chemicals in them, they tend not to be drinks. They tend to be like edible based. All of that said, last night, the House dropped a massive overhaul of the Senate's bill. So the Senate had Senate Bill 3 to ban THC. They sent it over to the House. The House passed the bill with an 123-page amendment. So I am,
oh my goodness.
yes, so I am currently working my way through that amendment. That's why I've been doing that this morning. So I don't have all of the details of it, but what I can say about it is that it does allow for THC in drinks and some other products, and it lays out a much stricter regulatory framework for all hemp consumable products, that would essentially give control for regulation and oversight to the Texas Alcohol and Beverage Commission, so the same body that currently regulates alcohol. And so, the way that bill is laid out, I feel like is a relatively reasonable way to go about regulating these products. Whether or not it will have the support, say it passes the House, whether it'll have support in the Senate or from the Lieutenant Governor, who have been pretty intent on banning all THC, that sort of remains to be seen.
Well, it's interesting. Of course, the reason this comes up, folks, is that about 30 states have legalized some general use of marijuana beyond medical use. As you mentioned, Texas has legalized only medical use, but the pressure to allow it in, and since our guest today is in the hood with us, there's actually some banners, some yellow banners at the corner, a nearby corner, promoting sale of marijuana. And they're like for $5, and it's pretty interesting. And I get tickled when they talk about it in a drink, because when I was in college, it was during the time of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And one of the things, I'm a hardcore lifetime anti-drug person, by the way, is a couple of these guys in the dorm took tea bags apart to get the cloth wrapper, stuffed them with marijuana, and cooked it into a tea substance, and apparently enjoyed it as marijuana tea. So when I hear this drink thing, I think back to my college days of these clowns doing this, creating the tea bag and sewing it together. I can't make this stuff up, folks.
That was the first model. That was the original THC drink.
And but of course, it does raise other issues, because one of the fellows actually did that, ended up I'm not sure what the correct term would be, but basically potted himself out of college. I mean, he did enough marijuana over time. He got disconnected from his courses and the rest of us in the real world. The neat news is I was doing some research about a year ago and actually located this fellow, and he did finish college and has a successful life today. So he did get past that. Dr. Katharine Neill Harris, how can our audience get more information about you and this important work that you're doing?
Well, they can visit our website. We have the Baker Institute Drug Policy Program. We have a website that has access to all of our publications and events that we have going on. I would encourage anyone who's interested in policy more broadly to look at the Baker Institute's website, because we have a lot of different centers that are doing really interesting stuff in health and energy policy, and immigration policy, all kinds of different areas. If anyone is interested in looking at the hemp policy issue more, we have a pretty cool interactive map on our website that looks at the hemp policies in all 50 states. So you can check that out as well.
This is Dr. David D. Schein. Thanks for joining me for this special edition of Saving America. Remember, a new Saving America show is aired on the Brushwood Media Network every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Listen on any of the 16 network stations, Apple or Google mobile app, Apple CarPlay, TuneIn, Smart Speaker, and all smart TVs. Find more information at the brushwoodmedianetwork.com. Please be sure to join us each week. We welcome and love your feedback from our growing audience.